Thank you, Vivek. So, we have seen at one level from his example how communities get together and create a just system for using what little water there is. We have seen Vivek talking about how industry is increasingly conscious of the limited water that exists and the limited demand it can make on that water. And therefore, throughout its supply chains, throughout all areas of their work, they are looking to reduce the amount of water used. To some people, both those examples may sound too good to be true. Water is always local, local, local. At the local level, you have to be able to find the right institutional frameworks to manage that water, not just for people, for industry, but also for the environment, for ecosystems, and for our intergenerational responsibilities as well. So would you like to touch a little bit on the institutional structures and frameworks that are there or missing, and how future conflicts which we are all talking about can be averted to some extent? What are the principles also of using water and allocating water, the limited water that there is?
Yeah. But first, I just want to place it on record that there are substantial differences from what Mr. Vivek Bharti was saying.
Yes.
At some stage, we will have to go into them.
Sure, we
but
should.
Please make a note of that. But coming to the question of institutions and principles and so on, you see, at the moment, we have an institutional arrangement for only one kind of dispute: interstate river water dispute. There is an article in the Constitution, 262, which provides for parliamentary legislation on this. Parliament has legislated the Interstate Water Disputes Act 1956, amended in 2002. So they set up tribunals. But that also is a last resort measure, because it is adjudication. Earlier on, before you reach the stage of adjudication, you need institutions or arrangements, formal or informal, for promoting understanding, preventing conflicts from reaching the stage of adjudication, providing for negotiation, mediation, conciliation, and so on. Those things are not there. So that is one thing that's a grave deficiency, even in regard to interstate water laws. Even after the adjudication, there are serious difficulties with the adjudication process. It takes time. Of course, now that much of the time taken would be reduced because of the 2002 amendments. Kaveri Tribunal took 17 years, and in February 2007, they gave their award. It is now 2011. Nothing has happened because all the state governments have gone back to the tribunal as they are entitled to. So there is something seriously wrong with this whole system. That is one. But apart from this, if you take industry versus agriculture, or drinking water versus something else and so on, you take disputes like Palar and Tirupur, where there is the industry not only takes away a lot of water, also poisons what is left so that nothing can be done with that water. And they go to the ordinary courts. There is no special law, special dispensation. The court at one stage, the Madras High Court, wanted these industries to be closed unless they can show satisfactory treatment plants working and so on. That has not happened because there are other economic compulsions which prevent you from closing the industry. And so this is a very unsatisfactory situation. What one needs is some kind of a machinery. You talked about allocations. You have the South African example. What they did there was, if I may take a few minutes to explain, when the new government came in South Africa after apartheid, they first abolished all existing water rights because they were completely unjust, inequitable rights. Having done that, they had to put something else in place. So they said every person now using water must apply for permission to use that water. And then we will make an allocation, we'll approve the use. Now, not everybody can apply. There are lots of people who cannot even apply for these entitlements. So they introduce a system of what they call general authorization. Even that is not working too well. Then, on the one hand, they had this highly enlightened constitution which asserts that water is held in public trust by the government, and water is a fundamental right, and there is a National Water Act. At the same time, they went in for large-scale privatization of water services, which created a crisis because the private companies simply disconnected those who are not able to pay. Thousands and thousands of people were disconnected. And it is established in the literature that this disconnection drove them to unsafe sources of water, resulting in an outbreak of cholera. So at that one stage, the government which succeeded Nelson Mandela, they introduced a Basic Water Act, under which they are providing 20 liters per head, which they make some assumptions about number of people in the household. It comes to something like 6,000 liters or so per household. Free, the rest of it is charged. Now, Maharashtra has Maharashtra Water Resources Regulatory Authority. But they are essentially concerned with issues of tariff and making rights tradable and so on. This is really, many people see it as heavily influenced by the neoliberal economic thinking of the World Bank as a precursor to the subsequent eventual privatization of water services. So Maharashtra Water Resources Regulatory Authority is not a model to follow, partly because it's also, we call it independent, we say it's outside government, it's completely bureaucracy oriented, and so it is not really a proper answer. But we need some kind of regulation. The difficulty is, when you say entitlement, somebody has to fix it. Now, who will fix it? Some bureaucrat will fix it. So you are reintroducing bureaucracy by the back door. This is not the answer. So you really, if you believe that the community is the custodian of water sources, as Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee said when he introduced the 2002 policy, then you must have this function of regulation should be regulation by the community. There is only a general legal principle that drinking water is the highest priority. That also does not exist in the Constitution. It has been read into the Constitution by the Supreme Court. Now today it's under the right to life, right to water has been brought in. But having brought that in, it has not been operationalized. It is not written into the charter of this corporation or the municipality or the private sector supplier, whoever it is. No one is told that this is a fundamental right that they must necessarily meet. It becomes a contract. What ought to be a relationship of fundamental right between supplier and provider and recipient, it becomes a contractual right.
Right.
You pay for it, you get it. And so this is something, the serious deficiency which needs to be rectified. A fundamental right must necessarily take precedence over every other kind of right. The exercise of an economic right by any entity, whether it's a commercial, agriculture or industry, should not jeopardize the fundamental right of somebody else. Now that is the issue, for instance, in Pachimada.
Yes.
Coca-Cola was, they had the bottling plant, they put up those 6 or 7 bore wells, they were drawing 1.5 million liters of water a day. And according to the villagers, this endangered the life and livelihoods of the people. They went to the panchayat stopped it. The company went an appeal to the Kerala High Court. The High Court overruled the initial single judge judgment and restored some of the rights of the Coca-Cola company, and eventually the case is now with the Supreme Court. Now we don't know what the Supreme Court is going to say. Underlying this is this principle that nobody owns natural resources, particularly water. Right? It is the property of the community. The state holds natural resources in trust for the community, is part of Indian law. So you do need 3 kinds of institutions, coming back to your question.
Yes.
One is some kind of an administrative institution which deals with entitlements.
Right.
But how this is going to be done without bureaucratizing it, I don't know. I don't have an easy answer. Secondly, you need some kind of an institution for avoiding or promoting agreement or, avoiding conflicts.
Yes.
Now, for instance, if you take interstate relations, there is an interstate council at the center. It's a constitutional body. It ought to be dealing with disagreements among the states and promoting agreement so that the case doesn't go to adjudication.
Right.
Then thirdly, you have adjudication, a judicial body.
Yes.
We have the tribunal system. It is subject to certain deficiencies. These can be set right without totally throwing this overboard. There are ways and means of improving the system. But all this proceeds on the assumption that there is some kind of national consensus on principles. There isn't.
There isn't. We really need to develop that because currently it seems that there is an underlying assumption that for 1.2 billion people, you need a certain rate of economic growth, and that economic growth idea has to drive everything else, and we worry about the consequences as they come along. Yeah. That's what's happened, unfortunately, very much in the water sector. Coming back to values and dharma, how do you sensitize a whole nation about the water question, because otherwise a renewable but limited resource has to be shared with agriculture, industry, drinking water needs, urban, rural, and the environment itself. Water is a basic agent, natural agent. It's a land forming agent. It is required for all the ecosystems to survive. But we are not, it's not seeping into our consciousness how important this question is going to be. It's going, if we don't do it right, it's going to limit the very economic growth which we are talking about, and ignoring water. So unless we set those, unless we move towards developing a water ethic, there's a lot of problems ahead. You know, I'm going to open this up to all of you, and it'll give them a chance to further develop what they have been saying.
In the Buddha example, Anupamji, you mentioned that he used the idea of coming together around water to use it, in fact, as a peace builder versus as a source of conflict. Right now, I guess as a peace builder, I'm thinking about how that can be done again today to bring, say, two empires together. So in the India-Pakistan situation, for example, do you see any possibility for us to bring water back to the center of this conversation and then use it as something around which we can sit and create methods for peace building?
Well, between India and Pakistan, in a sense, there is no outstanding water issue. It's been resolved in 1960 because there is an Indus Treaty. The land was partitioned in 1947. The water was partitioned in 1960. 3 rivers to Pakistan, 3 rivers to India. But, so as I said, whatever current issues or differences exist now are not about water sharing. The answer to your question is that here, essentially, this is not a water dispute. It's more a question, I would say, a security kind of concern. The treaty worked. It's supposed to be internationally recognized. It's supposed to be a successful treaty, which worked from 1960 to today. It has not been abrogated even during 3 or 4 wars. But that was because it was more or less insulated from the political process. It didn't form part of the India-Pakistan dialogue, political dialogue. The political dialogue was about Kashmir, was about border, was about various other things, not about this. But lately, after Kargil, this also has become part of the political dialogue. It is now figures in the India-Pakistan dialogue, and the army created a scare in Pakistan saying India is diverting your waters. It caught like wildfire throughout Pakistan. Everybody in Pakistan believes now that India is diverting Pakistan's water.
So even when you have a successful, peaceful way of dealing with things, it can turn any moment. So that's
so
really
then we hold a number of track 2 dialogues. We try to explain to them this is not happening and so on. To some extent, the people who come here go back convinced, but they are a very small number.
Right.
So this kind of uneasy relationship exists now.
The other things, looming questions are how India feels about China's water. I mean, Brahmaputra. So
exactly.
just like Pakistan feels about India,
exactly.
India is now feeling
India
about China.
feels exactly
what,
the same.
Yes.
Exactly. India's feelings towards China's possible diversion of Brahmaputra waters is an exact parallel to Pakistan's feelings about possible Indian holding back of water.
So as they say,
now there's one difference.
Yeah.
In the case of Pakistan, its fears are taken into account. There is a treaty which protects its interests.
Yes.
Between India and China, there is no water treaty.
There is no yet.
So whatever China does, it's only governed by international law.